All right, let's talk Texas A&M Aggies football. Been kind of a quiet off season for Texas A&M, and I think that's kind of a good thing. We know Coach Mike Elko is doing a really good job building his team, kind of retooling the roster through the recruiting process, through the transfer portal. And there's one new Texas A&M Aggie who is impressing everyone, making all kinds of plays. It's a great sign for the future of this program. We'll get into that in just a second. But first, I'm Nick. That's Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, the Texas A&M Aggies, like every other program, we're getting the hot and heavy part of the spring. Of course, we're finally starting to see what teams are going to look like for the future. And there's one new Texas A&M Aggie who is certainly part of the future, who is doing a great job so far. We got a bunch of great reports here. Let's pull them up and break it down then on the other side. This report is courtesy of ABC 25 Central Texas. All right, this first one is from Mike Elko. KC Concepcion is a kid who I'm familiar with from when I was at Duke. Aggie head coach Mike Elko said he was at NC State, had an electric freshman year. No kidding, he was phenomenal. Had a really good sophomore year. Was looking for a place to maybe get onto a bigger stage, and was able to come here and do that. I love the little dig at NC State there at the end. Bigger stage, that's awesome. Here's what Marcel Reed said. I'm really excited about those new guys that are in here just to kind of have a little bit of speed on, many different places in the offense. It's very exciting to be able to get a chance to throw these guys in the spring. And here's probably the most interesting tidbit is Will Lee III saying, I know one wide receiver that really stood out to me so far since we've been here was Casey Concepcion. Senior corner Will Lee III said. So he's really stood out in the locker room, in the weight room, and everything. He's a really great guy to be around. He knows what he's talking about. Then he's just leading that whole wide receiver group along. All right, I love what Elko's saying there. I really love what Will Lee is saying there. I always love when a corner gives some respect to the other side of the football. You usually mean that guy is a heck of a football player, and I think the Aggies may have got one of the bigger transfer steals coming to life here with KC Concepcion. Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this, but first, Aggies fans, your turn in the comment section below. Of all the new additions to this Aggies program this offseason, who were you expecting to have the biggest impact in 2025? Is it a transfer, recruit? Is it maybe a young guy just breaking into the starting lineup for the first time? Give us your breakout Aggie star and put them in the comment section below. But Miles, what are your thoughts on this latest news out of College Station?
Yeah, Nick, I think Concepcion is a guy who can bring a lot to this Texas A&M program. They needed, a more veteran guy to come in here. Really, he had a lot of speed on him. I think that's the main thing that we're hearing from a lot of these guys. Marcel Reed said it. Mike Elko, in a roundabout way, said it. He talked about his electric playmaking abilities, talked about his great, first and second seasons there. Then Will Lee, like you said, is a guy that stood out, whether it's in practice, the weight room, leadership abilities. That was a part that kind of stood out to me as well when I heard that comment is how, already so early on, a transfer coming in to a Texas A&M team who's got some great players on it all around the ball, and you're hearing a senior, a guy, Will Lee, who's been around for quite some time, saying this guy's already such a great leader. That speaks volumes about this guy. We know what his playmaking ability is. He's great. He's got good size, about like 5'11", 190. He brings a lot to the table in that aspect. He has really good speed, really good field stretching ability. But now the ability for a player like this to come in, transfer so early on, and just be able to bring leadership to the table this early, I think that's really great news for the Aggies because, Marcel Reed, great quarterback. I think he's going to be a great leader in the locker room, but have another guy come in and just be on your side, be a great leader in that offensive side of things. I think that can really not go overstated enough. That's going to be crucial this year. I think Concepcion brings a whole lot to the table. This is a guy, not only was he, fast on the field, he's fast on the track as well. He has like a sub 11 second 100-meter dash that he ran in 2024. So just really, really fantastic player. I think this is going to be really, really good fit for the Texas A&M Aggies. And most of all, I love the leadership he brings to the table. I think this is going to be very valuable for them going forward.
Yeah, and you're looking at a kid here in Concepcion, and I'm going to pull up his stats here just to remember how dynamic he was as a freshman. I mean, his numbers are it's comical, right? In his first season, he had 839 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns, while also running for 320 yards, 8 yards a carry. He also threw for a touchdown as well. In 2024, a little bit of a step back, but still pretty good. Caught 53 balls, 6 scores, ran for 36 yards, 2 scores, Did throw a pass, wasn't for a touchdown, but it did go for 28 yards. So, give some credit there. He's got a great passer rating looking at his numbers. But I think what he is essentially the football equivalent of a walking bucket. He's like a walking first down. He's just a guy who gets chunk plays. He's just a whether it's a slot getting open for a 15-yard out or a bubble screen, speed sweep, give him a trick play and throw the football. Right? This is what he is. He's just a walking chunk play. I don't know if he's a game breaker. I don't know if he's a 50, 60, 70-yard touchdown machine kind of guy. I don't know if he's 4 yards, 5 yards in a cloud of dust, just grinder slot receiver kind of thing. I think he's somewhere in between. I think he's just a guy who knows how to get those 10 to 20-yard chunks. And that can be really important for an offense. We know A&M's had the talent, and we saw it at times last season, where they can get those big plays and just flip things on its head. Marcel Reed was a big part of that going back to the LSU game, for example. And we know sometimes they can get down in the weeds and play power football and be tough and physical. Weren't as great at it sometimes in the bigger games, looking at the Texas matchup to be specific, but they can play that way stylistically. I think it's that middle game. I think it's having a guy who can get 15 yards, who can work that intermediate part of the field, a guy who can be a gadget guy and give you 12 yards on a speed sweep. I think that's something the Aggies missed last season. And I think this move, this addition of Concepcion, will be pivotal for them going forward because I think adding that element to their offense, paired with the big playability and the physical inside, led by those big guys up front on the offensive line, could push this offense to the next level, and it probably will. I think we're expecting a big leap going to 2025 offensively, and part of that is, of course, getting more familiar with the scheme, figuring out the talent around it. Just obviously year one, anytime you have a new head coach, new staff, there's going to be some ups and downs. But let's not discount the fact that this is an Aggies team that was missing that intermediate playmaker a lot of last season that they've addressed. I love the mental stuff like you brought up, the locker room things. That's always a good sign. Anytime you bring in a transfer, even if he's a good player, even if he's a playmaker, there's always the concern, hey, will he upset the apple cart? Is he not a nice person? Is he not, I hate saying not a nice person. Is he not a good person? Is he not a good fit? Do people hate him? That's always a red flag potential waiting to happen to blow up a locker room with the transfer portal. We've seen it happen on other programs all the time. Not the case so far with Concepcion, and that's obviously a great indicator that he'll fit in perfectly as we work to let Mike Elko's culture really take hold in College Station. So this is one of those moves that got a little attention at the time, but I think it kind of got lost in a lot of other big moves going around the world of college football. But I think it has a chance to have a massive impact because if you look at what the Aggies were offensively in 2024, this was their biggest deficiency, in my opinion, and it looks like KC Concepcion is perfectly suited to solve that problem.
Yeah, Nick, and you look at the stats that Casey Concepcion had last season. I mean, he had a down year. He had 460 receiving yards compared to in 2023, where he had 839. But he still would have been the second highest receiver on this Aggies team. Talking about Noah Thomas had 574 yards last year. Concepcion would slot in right behind that. So I think what he brings to the table, NC State probably not going to have as good of weapons, not as good quarterbacking as a team like Texas A&M. I think he brings a lot to the table. If he comes somewhere in between the middle, he also, that freshman year, he ran the ball 41 times for 320 yards. So that was a huge season for him overall, over, almost 1,200 all-purpose yards for him in that aspect. So I think he brings a lot to the table as far as being able to, like you said, more like a Cordell Patterson type of guy that can take the snaps, be a good running back, but also line up and is deadly as a receiver. I think he's a very versatile player overall. But you look what he did last year, down year for him, 460 yards, but he's still, compared to what this Aggies team had last year, he brings so much to the table. So I think this guy is going to have a better year this year than he did last year. I think he's primed and set up in a great position being with the Aggies to do just that. But even if he doesn't, if he has just as good of a year as he did last year, he would still add a ton to this Aggies offense. And I really think that's understated here. This guy can be a game changer as far as having a weapon, having a guy that you can slot in around the ball in different positions and really get this offense moving. You love to have a guy that's kind of like that X factor on the field where you don't know exactly what is he going to do. Is he going to go out of the backfield? Or are they going to check him out? Is he going to go out for a pass? Is he going to run the ball? Is he, like you said, is he even going to throw the ball? I mean, there's 4 or 5 passes in his career so far. Last year, he didn't score a touchdown. The year before, he did. So, I mean, there's a lot of options here when this guy's on the field. I think he's very, anyone that can make a question mark for the other team, say, hey, when this guy's out there, we don't exactly know what's going to happen. That's always a great game plan to have. And I think Casey Concepcion brings that to the table in spades.
Yeah, and just one final point to hit on, and you mentioned it. I think it's a great point. In the modern era of the transfer portal and NIL and people moving around, having a playmaker that can introduce question marks for opposing defenses can be incredibly important because we're dealing with defenses. It's not the old era of college football where you look in the secondary and linebacking core, let's say for Alabama or LSU, and it's people that have played together for 2, 3, 4 years. You could be looking at 4 or 5 new starters, people that have been with the program for not years, but in some cases just a few months. And that means there's going to be a lot of communication issues. And the best thing that can help your offense out is having a playmaker that can induce some of those communication issues with his versatility and his playmaking ability. That's exactly what Casey Concepcion is. Look for this young playmaker. I should say he's obviously a young kid, but he's got a lot of experience. But look for this playmaker to really just cause a lot of confusion opposing secondaries by the way he lines up all over the field with the motions and things like that. And even if he doesn't generate the intermediate and big plays for the offense, the attention he brings because of his versatility, both in terms of execution and lining up and going in motion, should open things up for other people in this A&M offense.